Hello YouTube, Javed here from Cirque-it, and I'm here to talk to you about partnering mechanics in general. Things anyone who's interested in furthering their skills in a partnering style, rather professional, recreational, or just flat out curious, should know. Although there are a lot of individual styles with very individual techniques, when it comes down to it, almost all partnering have certain basic things in common. The first being that you have two different types of lifts: static and dynamic. Static lifts are basically 1, 2, 3 lifts, where both flyers start with their feet on the ground, the base then picks up the flyer, and the flyer then strikes and holds a pose. Dynamic lifts are lifts where one or both partners are in continual motion. It is crucial to understand the different sets of difficulty when deciding what lift you want to learn. The harder the lift is, the more time it will take to master, but besides that, it also means that your spotters need to be more proficient, and also you probably need more resources in order to learn the lift to begin with. It is worth noting that people believe that anyone, any level can basically learn a very difficult static lift, and the reason for this is because static lifts are split up into very simple steps. Your starting position, followed by your transition, ending in your pose. This means you can focus all your attention on these key moments, and your spotters only really need to look out for 1 or 2 things that can go wrong. Dynamic lifts are chains of several steps that all need to be mastered separately before you can perform the entire move. Now, this does not mean that dynamic lifts are harder than static lifts. It sounds weird, but static lifts can be insanely difficult. It's kind of like comparing Olympic powerlifting to, for an example, a Olympic triple jump, where one technique requires more strength and balance, the other requires more momentum and timing. Now, one thing I will say though is that spotting a static lift is much easier than spotting a dynamic lift, which is also one of the reasons why static lifts are just handier to learn when you have limited resources. Spotting a dynamic lift flat out sucks. Okay, so those are our two primary type of lifts, and then you have styling, and there are tons of different styles: tango, rock and roll, ballet, acrobatic gymnastics, and all these styles have their own individual approach on how they want their techniques done. But these styles do all have subcategories in common. The most basic of these subcategories is called momentum lifts, and these are so easy I don't even really call them lifts anymore. It's more like a suspension. Momentum lifts are lifts where one partner uses his or her body weight to suspend the other partner in the air in some way, shape, or form, usually to achieve a type of a static pose. These techniques require very little technique and almost no strength whatsoever, but can still have a pretty strong effect on your audience if choreographed well into your scene. These lifts are very popular amongst beginners because they're quite easy, they don't require much strength, they have a medium effect on their audience, and the fear of getting hurt is very low. Very low. So a step up from momentum lifts would be levers.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
Okay, not that lever, although I love that movie. Levers, or levers, potato, potato. Levers are like momentum lifts, only these lifts require the standing partner to throw his or her body weight off center, so off balance, and by doing so, they catch the equilibrium of both partners and put them back into balance. Kind of like how two kids will sit on a seesaw and try to keep it in check without ever having their feet on the ground. That's the same principle of a lever. Usually, a lift that involves the smaller partner picking up the larger partner will involve some kind of lever technique, and the reason why is because then the smaller partner can use their body mass to suspend the base in the air as opposed to having to rely on brute strength, which makes no sense if the partner that's being picked up is bigger. People often see these levers and react like they're seeing some kind of magic trick done, like they're literally in some kind of prestige. Jedi powers! Hashtag After Effects. Seriously though, people have come up to me going, "How are you able to lift girl overhead with such scrawny body?" He wasn't from here. Now, I'm not the biggest guy around, so I understand that it throws people off when I'm able to pick up a girl with one hand and hold her over my head. But when a girl is able to pick up a guy twice her size, people are literally stupefied. I'm just kidding. That's not a wand, it's just a chopstick. Not sure that makes it any better, but that's just... Okay, so now we've talked about two of the primary subcategories, being momentum lifts and levers. And of course we have our basic type of lifts, which are static lifts and dynamic lifts. But there's two more subcategories to go. One of them is my favorite, and those are overhead lifts. If I don't see an overhead lift in an adage act or a circus act, I'm not happy. If it's all momentum and lever lifts, then I am simply not happy. I need to have at least one overhead. Be it either static or dynamic, one overhead is a must. Overhead lifts are hard. They're physically very demanding, whether it's dynamic or static. They take a lot of training, they take good spotters, and they take a leap of faith from the flyers. And understand something, all bases that are out there. If you're 6 feet tall, right, and your eyes are always at 6 feet height looking at the world, and your flyer is 5'6", let's say, and you pick her up overhead, her viewpoint of the world goes from 5'6" to 9 feet. So you're almost doubling the height off the ground that they're used to, and that's why the fear factor is so high for flyers when it comes to overhead lifts. Generally speaking, you should see overhead lifts as a type of breaking point. It's not quite possible to do under recreational timetables anymore, and there are several reasons for this. Don't forget that overhead lifts are incredibly demanding on you both physically and emotionally. You have to be very in sync, the flyer needs to be tight and fearless, and the base needs to be strong, confident, and stable as possible, and you only get that with hours and hours of training. So if you just learned an overhead lift on Monday and you go a whole week without doing it, and say that Monday you have a break or something and you come back on a Wednesday or a Thursday, so like 10 days later, you will not be able to do that lift. You can forget it. It's like starting over again. Of course, all styles give their partner work their own different interpretations, but this has a much bigger impact than you might initially expect. Take contemporary for an example. Contemporary is the most contributing style when it comes to partner work on an artistic level. These artists push the boundaries forward constantly. They try to come up with new and creative ways, different types of lifts. They communicate complex emotions and relationships between each other. And what they come up with is stuff that you would never expect. Then you have the acrobatic world, which is the complete opposite. Here, they focus on partnering mostly for athletics and technique. It is frowned upon in this world to use too much drama and too much emotion in your routines because it will distract from the technique itself. And mixed pairs have the added problem that they will be deducted for inappropriate emotions in their routines. So no surprise, in the acrobatics world, they will score your technique card double, ×2, and your artistry card only once, ×1. So the priority is clearly very heavy on the athletic side. And then of course you have the circus world, which you can see in Vegas and other places in the world with Cirque-de-soleil. And this world again is completely different from acrobatics or contemporary, and they indulge in the tension between the man and the woman. Like this. Can give you the power. And this. This. And this. And this. You get the idea, the list goes on. To an extent, it's not so hard to see why. These women are light, they're flexible, they're fit, they're usually gorgeous. The men are huge, they're big, they're strong, they're pretty much everything you would expect from a Greek god, and they're using a physical art form to communicate physical tension. The last subcategory we're going to talk about is also the most dangerous and by far the hardest. Throws, along with their drops and catches. Now, these partnering techniques are incredibly dangerous and they involve some very fast action mechanics. The window where things can go wrong is very small, but when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. Throws are impossible to learn on recreational level. You have to have resources at your disposal. Trainers, a facility, spotters, definitely spotters, otherwise it's just way too dangerous. To ensure that the technique and both partners are safe and reliable, your muscles and your nerves need to be trained constantly. Both the acrobatic gymnastics and the world of circus arts have embraced throws for their own reason. The acrobatic gymnastics world loves throws because they're technically incredibly difficult to do and a great way to test their athletes, and circus arts love these moves because they're showstoppers. So that's our summary. 2 basic lifts, static and dynamic, 4 basic subcategories, momentum, levers, overheads, and throws, and then of course a variety of tons of different styles. We hope you had a good time, and remember, we create tutorials for these lifts regularly. So if there's a lift you would like to see, leave us a comment in the sections below. We read them all and we try to get a tutorial up stat. Subscribe, click the bell, and see you soon. So tiring.